When a decision gets hard, you know exactly what to do. You think harder and you gather more information and you try to hold all the variables in your head and you push through. You push through until something clicks, until you make it work. And every single one of those responses, those habits you've created, are making your thinking worse. When a decision gets hard, you know exactly what to do. You think harder and you gather more information and you try to hold all the variables in your head and you push through. You push through until something clicks, until you make it work. And every single one of those responses, those habits you've created, are making your thinking worse. And I don't mean neutral, really worse, measurably, predictably worse, in ways research has documented clearly and that almost nobody in the professional world has accounted to. And here's what's actually happening when a decision feels difficult. Your working memory is under load. Your attentional control is already degraded, and the evaluation system that's supposed to weigh variables and produce reliable output is already compromised. And your response to that is to pile even more onto this. More thinking, more data, more questions you want answered, more pressure. And you wouldn't do that to a server that's already at capacity, and you wouldn't do that to your own team that's already overwhelmed, but you do it to your own brain every single day because the alternative feels like giving up, but it isn't. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. I'm Gwen Bach. I have a master's degree in applied neuroscience, and I'm the founder of Applied Brain Lab, where I study how modern, and I don't mean neutral, really worse, measurably, predictably worse, in ways research has documented clearly and that almost nobody in the professional world has accounted to. And here's what's actually happening when a decision feels difficult. Your working memory is under load. Your attentional control is already degraded, and the evaluation system that's supposed to weigh variables and produce reliable output is already compromised. And your response to that is to pile even more onto this. More thinking, more data, more questions you want answered, more pressure. And you wouldn't do that to a server that's already at capacity, and you wouldn't do that to your own team that's already overwhelmed, but you do it to your own brain every single day because the alternative feels like giving up, but it isn't. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. I'm Gwen Bach, and I have a master's degree in applied neuroscience, and I'm the founder of Applied Brain Lab, where I study how modern environments affect and shape decision-making in ambitious professionals and business owners. In the last video, we covered why decision quality isn't a fixed trait, and why confidence doesn't mean accuracy, and also why the system that catches our errors goes offline before you notice anything is wrong. If you haven't watched that video yet, go back and start there, because what we're building today assumes you already understand that your evaluation system has limits. And what we're doing today is looking at what happens when those limits are hit. And you do what feels natural. And 4 things here. What actually happens when you think harder, under pressure, under load, and why it produces worse output and not better one. Why holding complex decisions in your head is definitely not efficient because it's incomplete, and why more information past a certain point degrades the quality of your decisions, and why procrastination on hard decisions is almost never a motivation problem. So let's go. There's a version of Think Harder that works. In a low load, well-rested, and low distraction state, more deliberate thinking does improve decision quality. The slow, effortful reasoning system does its best work when it has resources available and time to run. The problem is That's not the condition under which most hard decisions get made today. Most hard decisions get made at the end of high demand days in meetings stacked back to back, after Slack messages, after hours of context switching, and under time pressure, in exactly the conditions where cognitive load is already high and working memory is already constrained. And in those conditions, thinking harder doesn't engage your system more deeply. It starts a loop. What Baumeister et al. Documented in their work on cognitive depletion is that under resource constraint, the reasoning process becomes repetitive rather than generative. You cycle through the same variables over and over again, and you return to the same consideration. And that kind of thinking feels productive because it feels like effort, but the actual evaluation is not improving with each pass. It's degrading. And write this down. The effort signal and the output signal are not the same thing. Feeling like you're thinking hard is not evidence that your thinking is actually good. And under load, effort and quality decouple, and effort going with this quality drops, and more thinking under load is definitely not more processing. It's the same processing repeated, and it lowers the quality every time. Now, the next one costs people more than they realize because it feels like a reasonable approach, faster than writing things down, more fluid than externalizing everything. And for simple decisions, it works fine, but for complex decision, it does not work at all. Working memory, the system that holds and manipulates information in real time, has a capacity of roughly 4 to 5 chunks of information at once. And that's not a loose estimate. That's what Cohen's research established, and it has held up consistently across all subsequent studies. For 4 to 5 chunks in a clean, low-load state, under cognitive load, so under stress, that capacity shrinks further. And now think about a genuinely complex decision, maybe a hire or some strategy or some financial commitment, of restructuring of your team. And those decisions don't involve 4 variables, they involve 20, 40, and some of them interdependent, where the value of one variable changes depending on the state of another. And when you hold that all in your head, you're not holding all of it. You're holding the most recently activated variables. The rest is being dropped, distorted, or averaged out in ways we all are not aware of. And the decision we think we're evaluating is not the decision we're actually evaluating. We're evaluating a simplified and incomplete version of it. And the simplification is invisible to us because working memory doesn't flag that it's dropped stuff. And thinking on paper is not a productivity habit. It's a direct structural fix for a hard biological limit of our brains. Because when the variables are written in front of you and me, rather than held inside our constrained brain, we're no longer limited by working memory capacity. Because you can see the whole decision and you can interrogate the relationships between the variables. And you can notice what's missing. The decision you make on paper is a different decision from the one you're making in your head. Not because paper is magic, but because your head was never holding all of it at one place. And by the way, would you please hit the like button so it reaches more people who need to see it? Of course, only if you like this content. This next one runs directly against the instinct of every data-driven professional. More information feels like accuracy, and more research feels like better preparation. And up to a point most people pass very quickly, that's true. Past that point, more information makes decisions worse. And for me too, and I've experienced that too. And here's the mechanism. Working memory has a fixed capacity. When information volume exceeds that capacity, the brain doesn't evaluate all of it. It can't. Instead, it relies increasingly on mental shortcuts that produce fast, low-effort approximations, and the information volume decreases and signal-to-noise ratio worsens. Relevant variables become harder to separate from irrelevant ones, and the cognitive cost of each additional piece of information goes up while the marginal value of that information goes down. Schwartz documented this in the context of choice overload. More options produce worse decisions and lower satisfaction, and the mechanism generalizes beyond consumer choice to any decision under information load. So you reach a threshold, and past that threshold, more information is not helping you better. It's increasing load, it's increasing noise, and it's pushing your processing towards shortcut rather than away from them. The practical implication is not gather less information, it's this. Identify the variables that actually drive the decision, limit your input to those, and stop before you hit the point of diminishing returns. Most professionals have no defined stopping point. They gather until they run out of time or until confidence appears. And we already know that confidence is not a reliable signal of quality. And we've all experienced that. Okay, this last one is the most personally loaded because procrastination carries a character judgment. And I openly confess that I am a recovering procrastinator. I've struggled with it for a long time. And if you're putting off a decision, the standard interpretation is that you're avoiding discomfort or lacking discipline, or you're not committed enough, or you need a bigger why. And that really irks me every time. It's like your why just hasn't been big enough. That interpretation is almost always wrong. Procrastination on decisions is, in most cases, a load, a stress response. The decision carries high cognitive or emotional demand. The evaluation system is already under strain, and your brain, which is a resource-conserving system and not a moral one, defers the task to protect itself from additional drain. And this is not laziness, it's a signal. C. Royce and Cycle, research on procrastination, reframes it precisely this way, as cognitive load management rather than motivational failure. The task isn't being avoided because you don't care about it. It's being avoided because engaging with it right now, in your current state, at your current load level, costs more than the system your brain is willing to spend that moment. And the more stressed and the more overloaded you are, the more likely you are to procrastinate. And here's what makes that useful. If procrastination is a load, is a stress signal, the response to it changes completely. The conventional response is motivation, push harder and create accountability, force yourself to start. That response treats the symptom. It doesn't address the root, the underlying cognitive load, the stress. The correct response is to ask, what is making this decision cognitively expensive? And can I reduce that cost before I engage with it? Can I externalize the variables? Am I not holding it in working memory? And can I reduce the complexity by eliminating options that don't actually need to be on the table? And can I make this decision in a lower load state, earlier in the day or after sleep, or after a period of genuine rest, like taking a walk in the forest? Procrastination is your evaluation system telling you something. The something is not you're lazy or this load is too high right now. Listen to it. And by the way, if you're finding this useful, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the rest of the series. It's going to be 5 videos and every video builds on the last one. So here's what you actually do with all of this. The common thread across everything we've covered today is the same. Your evaluation system has limits, and so has mine. And the standard responses to a hard decision push directly against those limits because more thinking, more information, and more processing, all of them increase load on a system, on a brain that's already constrained. The thinking method is decision externalization. 3 steps on paper. Before you engage with a complex or hard decision, write the variables down, not a summary of the situation. The actual factors that will determine whether this decision turns out right or wrong. Get them out of working memory and onto paper. And you will almost always find there are fewer really relevant variables than the cognitive load of the decision suggested. And you will almost always find at least one variable you weren't consciously tracking. Second, set a defined information threshold before you start gathering input. Decide what information you actually need and what decision point you're working towards. This is not about being incurious, it's about recognizing that information gathering past a certain point increases noise rather than signal. And you need to define the stopping point before you start, not after the feeling of confidence appears. Third, when you notice yourself avoiding a decision, don't reach for motivation. Reach for load reduction. Ask what's making this decision expensive and address that first. Write the variables down, eliminate non-options, and change the conditions, and only then engage. Paper, not screen. The reason for that is not aesthetic. It's that a screen itself is a source of cognitive load and distraction. Paper is a clean external surface with no competing demands on your attention. And here's the reframe I would like to leave you with. Effort is not the same as output. The feeling of working hard on a decision is not evidence that the decision is being well made. And the instincts that feel most like the right response to difficult decision, like push harder, gather more information, hold it together, be disciplined, are often the instincts that are just making it worse. And I know this because I've done this. So decision making is not a test of how hard you can think. It's a management problem. You're managing a system with defined limits, operating in conditions that frequently exceed those limits. And the question is whether you're working with those limits or against them. The professionals or business owners who make consistently good decisions under pressure are not the ones thinking hardest. They're the ones who have built the conditions and the tools that allow their evaluation system to do what it's capable of without overloading it. Next video, we're going into the environment, because it's not just what you do with your own brain, it's what your working environment is doing to it all day without your awareness or your permission. Multitasking, busyness, open offices, stress as a productivity signal. We're taking all of this apart in the next video.